Richard Linklater or Alejandro Iñárritu?
I'm gonna say Iñárritu. One take, 2 hours straight, no stopping.
Now, Linklater, 5 minutes once a year.
At the 72nd Golden Globe Awards on January 11, 2015, a narrative began to form for what might be the film to beat for the rest of the awards season. Richard Linklater's Boyhood, the film that famously shot over the course of 12 years to see the lead character grow from child to adult, received 5 nominations at the Globes, and it ended up winning 3. First up was Patricia Arquette, who beat out such heavyweights as Jessica Chastain, Emma Stone, and Meryl Streep for her spellbinding, emotionally devastating turn in Linklater's film. I feel like most people going into the night felt like that was the one trophy Boyhood was going to win, but could the movie also take director and motion picture drama? I mean, talk about competition. In director, there was Ava DuVernay, David Fincher, Wes Anderson, Alejandro G. Iñárritu. So much insane talent there. And in picture, Boyhood was up against Selma, Foxcatcher, The Imitation Game, and The Theory of Everything. 4 other films that were very much beloved that year, any of which could have taken the top prize. There could have been so many different outcomes that night, but thankfully the Hollywood Foreign Press got this one absolutely correct. Best Director indeed went to the incredible Richard Linklater for his monumental achievement with Boyhood, and then his film, as it should have, also took Motion Picture Drama. What had won in that category the previous year? 12 Years a Slave, which went on to take Best Picture at the Oscars. The year before that, Argo, which also won Picture. That night, it looked like my second favorite film of 2014, just behind Whiplash, was going to have a clear path to victory at the Oscars in the top 2 categories, especially when the film I thought might be Boyhood's closest competition, the similarly acclaimed Birdman, didn't even win the picture prize at the Globes in the comedy or musical category. Birdman took Best Actor in a Motion Picture Comedy or Musical for Michael Keaton, setting up a weeks-long battle between Keaton and Eddie Redmayne in The Theory of Everything, but in Picture, Comedy or Musical, the Hollywood Foreign Press chose Wes Anderson's The Grand Budapest Hotel over Birdman, and I figured, geez, if Birdman can't even win that, it's not going to overtake Boyhood on Oscars night. In early January, it seemed very unlikely, but oh how wrong I was, as after another strong showing for Boyhood at the Critics' Choice Awards, Birdman eventually took flight, winning the prize for Best Cast at SAG, Best Director for Iñárritu at DGA, and Best Picture at PGA. By the time we arrived at the Academy Awards, Patricia Arquette looked to be the only sure thing from Boyhood to win a gold trophy, and Birdman appeared ready to take original screenplay, director, and picture. And of course, that's what happened. The love for Boyhood had slowly faded, and Birdman's ascension was complete. What the hell happened? Where did the passion for Boyhood go? Why did Birdman pull ahead in such a dominant way to eventually leave Boyhood at the Oscars in its dust? My name is Brian Rowe, this is the Awards Contender, and here is the story of how Birdman beat Boyhood. From the beginning of his film career, Richard Linklater was obsessed with time, how important it can be, and how fleeting. Look at Slacker, in which the camera roams from character to character as they go about their day. Look at Dazed and Confused, which focuses on students living it up on their last day of school. Look at the Before trilogy, which is all about how time affects romance, relationships, maturity, and change. Linklater loves to examine the use of time in cinema so much that he did the unthinkable in 2002. He planned to shoot a single feature film for 12 long years. The production would get together once a year from 2002 to 2013 for a few weeks' time, his film following the life of a boy from 1st grade to 12th grade and all the drama in between.
Do you still love Dad?
I still love your father. But that doesn't mean it was healthy for us to stay together.
He brought on board his frequent collaborator Ethan Hawke, along with Patricia Arquette, Linklater's daughter Lorelai, and Eller Coltrane in the lead role. Was Linklater crazy? In many ways, this project seemed impossible. There was no completed script, they would navigate the story from year to year, the cast couldn't sign long-term contracts due to the de Havilland law, which makes it illegal to contract someone for more than 7 years. What if one of the actors decided to bail? What if someone died, like Linklater himself? Who could really guarantee that 12 years later there would be a feature film anywhere worth a damn? Amazingly, the film distributor IFC committed to a budget of $200,000 per year for a total of $2.4 million over a 12-year shooting period. Linklater had proven his worth going back more than a decade with a variety of beloved films, so it's not like he was an untested filmmaker. He clearly had the wherewithal to make Boyhood happen, but not seeing a return on your investment for a dozen years was quite the gamble, thankfully one that paid off. After the movie premiered at the 2014 Sundance Film Festival, it was released theatrically in July, eventually earning $57 million worldwide against a budget that never exceeded $4 million. Not bad, I would say, for a quiet, nearly 3-hour drama about a boy growing into a man. The reviews didn't hurt, with 97% of the nation's critics giving the movie a favorable rating, many naming it the #1 film of 2014, and then came all the awards love, with top prizes at New York Film Critics and Los Angeles Film Critics, along with Golden Globes, as I previously discussed. At Critics' Choice, the dominance continued, Linklater winning Best Director again, and the film taking Best Picture again. Boyhood truly was the movie of the moment, in every way the film to beat when it came to the major awards ceremonies, but then along came Birdman. Alejandro G. Inarritu has never been a prolific filmmaker, somebody who can churn out movies year after year. With one rare exception, the man takes his time between films, often 4 or more years, and that of course was time well spent because Inarritu's first 4 movies are superb. Amores Perros was the breakthrough in 2000, a film that set up his trademark of intertwining stories that continued in 2003's 21 Grams and 2006's Babel. Referred to as his Death Trilogy, Inarritu's first 3 films did well with critics and during award season, Babel becoming his biggest box office success at the time and winning the Best Motion Picture Drama prize at the Golden Globes. His 2010 film Beautiful didn't have the same celebratory reception as his first 3 movies did, flopping at the box office and only getting 2 Oscar nominations, Best International Feature and Best Actor for Javier Bardem. By 2014, Inarritu still hadn't won an Oscar yet, only nominated in Director and Picture for Babel. Was his latest film Birdman, about a has-been film star attempting a comeback on Broadway, going to be his ticket to Oscar glory?
What are you saying? Spit it out.
Oh.
You're saying what?
Oh.
What are you saying? You're saying love is absolute.
Yes! Yes! The kind of love that I'm talking about, it is absolute!
After having made so many serious dramas, Inarritu was ready to make something a little funnier, a little lighter, and he early on committed to telling the story in what would look like a single continuous shot where he could, quote, submerge the protagonist in an inescapable reality and take the audience with him, end quote. When it came to casting, Michael Keaton became the obvious choice to play the lead role given his history as Batman in the 2 landmark Tim Burton films. Such powerhouse actors like Edward Norton, Emma Stone, Naomi Watts, Amy Ryan, and many others came on board the project, the film studio's new Regency and Searchlight putting up a budget of $16.5 million. Production was reportedly difficult, the long takes requiring lots of rehearsal time so every actor would hit their marks exactly right. Norton went on to say, quote, I've never ever been on a set where every day ended with an enormous, authentic sort of cheer at having made it. You're waiting for the scream from Inarritu, and everybody was genuinely excited, end quote. After a laborious post-production period of editing and visual effects, Birdman was finally ready and picked as the opening title of the Venice Film Festival. It released to theaters in October 2014, eventually earning $103 million worldwide. The movie holds a 91% approval rating on Rotten Tomatoes, with most critics praising the film, its ideas, ambition, performances, and cinematography. And like Boyhood, Birdman appeared as the #1 film of the year on many critics' top 10 lists. Also like Boyhood, Birdman was not a typical movie, with its harsh commentary on the entertainment industry, with its long takes and unusual narrative that blends the speculative with reality, and it wasn't clear early on how well it might do during award season. It seemed likely to get plenty of nominations everywhere, but could the film actually win any top prizes? At the Globes, as I said, it lost director and picture, although Keaton won Best Actor and the film took Best Screenplay. At Critics' Choice, Keaton and the script won again, and the film also got Best Ensemble, Cinematography, Editing, and Score, but it couldn't win picture or director. That went to Boyhood. All eyes were on SAG. Birdman and Boyhood were both up for Best Performance by a Cast. If Boyhood had won that, the momentum absolutely would have been on its side going into the Oscars. It would have remained the movie to beat. But then, in a category that also included The Grand Budapest Hotel, The Imitation Game, and The Theory of Everything, Birdman won the top prize instead, many of the cast members taking turns to give a speech. The same way Crash beating Brokeback Mountain at SAG changed that award season's trajectory, the same way The King's Speech and Parasite and many others did after it, Birdman's victory at SAG showed that this wildly irreverent film did indeed have what it took to rise to the top. But at the same time, Boyhood wasn't out of it, as at BAFTA it once again took the top 2 prizes, Best Director for Linklater and Best Film of the Year. So, considering how well Boyhood did at 3 of the season's big precursor ceremonies, one could say it still had a path to major victories at the Oscars. Hell, at the Film Independent Spirit Awards, Birdman won Best Feature, but Linklater won Best Director. Even at the end of that season, there was still passion for Boyhood, Linklater in the director category especially receiving lots of love. Some people hated the movie, some thought it was overrated, but many people, like myself, loved it. Like, really, really loved it. Did Boyhood have any shot at some big wins at the Oscars? Well, let's explore the 87th Academy Awards, which took place on February 22nd, 2015. Hosted by Neil Patrick Harris, the ceremony mostly featured winners in top categories that had been sewn up for weeks, and really, the only major suspense that night was in Best Actor, Best Director, and Best Picture. Best Supporting Actor had gone to J.K. Simmons all season long for his memorable performance in Whiplash, so he was winning 100%. Same thing for Patricia Arquette, the one constant from Boyhood that award season who nobody in Best Supporting Actress could ever overtake. There were no surprises in Best Actress either, that gold trophy seemingly engraved with Julianne Moore's name for Still Alice months before. I've always maintained that Rosamund Pike should have been more competitive for Gone Girl, but Moore had the appealing, overdue narrative awards voters decided to never stray from. Graham Moore won Best Adapted Screenplay for The Imitation Game, that made sense, and Birdman took Original Screenplay, which also made sense given that Boyhood had never been very competitive there all season. With Birdman also taking a prize that night in Best Cinematography for the great Emmanuel Lubezki, it did look like the top prizes might be going in that film's direction. However, despite winning a bunch of Best Actor prizes for weeks, Michael Keaton lost the Oscar to Eddie Redmayne for The Theory of Everything, which showed that Birdman wasn't infallible. Today that loss makes sense in retrospect, given that Redmayne was playing a famous real-life figure, Stephen Hawking, and had taken the Best Actor prize at SAG and BAFTA. But Keaton being in such a popular movie that award season makes one think he did get close to winning that prize at the Oscars, especially given that Birdman went on to win Best Director for Alejandro G. Iñárritu and Best Picture of the Year. Yes, at the end of the day, Birdman at the Academy Awards came out on top, Iñárritu winning 3 gold trophies that night in Screenplay, Director, and Picture, Linklater walking away with nothing, his movie only winning Best Supporting Actress, despite shooting Boyhood for 12 years, sticking with an arguably kind of insane filmmaking process and schedule, and ultimately doing such a spectacular job, he still couldn't overtake Iñárritu at the final big ceremony. And a decade on now, we have to ask ourselves why. Why did Birdman ultimately beat Boyhood at the Oscars? Here are the top 5 reasons. The first reason I would say is that Hollywood loves to reward themselves. Movies about the entertainment industry have done well at the Oscars from the very beginning, many awards voters who work in the industry able to identify with the main characters and see themselves up on the screen. Even if the film isn't altogether kind in its representation, if it's honest and authentic and compelling all the way through, voters will go to bat for it. Go back to 1950 when All About Eve and Sunset Boulevard both did very well at the Oscars, both showing the darker sides of the entertainment industry in deliriously entertaining fashion. All About Eve went on to win Best Director and Best Picture, and Sunset Boulevard won a Screenplay prize. Getting closer to Birdman, we had The Artist and Argo win Best Picture, both films telling wildly different stories about the film industry and how it plays an important role in the culture at large. Awards voters love seeing their own lives reflected back onto them, and I do think that element of Birdman helped it dominate to the extent it did by Oscars night. Birdman was an insider film made by an insider director. Linklater, who lives in Austin, Texas, has always been an outsider in the way he develops and makes his movies. That outsider status for Linklater and Boyhood in general, I do think hurt its chances. The second reason is that as the 2015 award season went along, a strong backlash against Boyhood started building. Linklater's movie came on so strong the previous summer, immediately referred to as one of the greatest films of the year, a total original in the way it was made, that some people started pushing against it, especially after it started winning Best Picture and Best Director at those earlier ceremonies. Many thought it was only being lifted up the way it was because of how it got made, not based on the merits of the movie itself. In February 2015, Bob Seska in the Huffington Post wrote a long article entitled "It's Okay If You Didn't Like Boyhood, and Here Are Many Reasons Why." In the piece, he tore apart the story, the characters, the very idea that a movie has to be loved just because it was shot for a dozen years. So yeah, he didn't care for it at all, and you know, he wasn't the only one. I remember seeing this kind of sentiment on the Twitter timeline a lot in those final weeks before the Oscars. People were checking out the movie after hearing all sorts of amazing things about it, and they were walking away scratching their heads, not understanding why anyone would care about a nearly 3-hour film that's just about a kid growing up, where not a whole lot of major events happen in the narrative. Many people just didn't respond to that naturalism that we see in Boyhood, and so lots of screaming of that word overrated began to take shape with no ending in sight. If Boyhood had started out that award season as the underdog, it might have done better on Oscars night, but winning as much as it did so early on put Boyhood on a very high pedestal, with many in and outside the industry wanting to tear it down. The third reason is that Birdman is the flashier film, one that could get into more categories and be considered all across the board. As strong as a film Boyhood is, it wasn't one that was necessarily going to be competitive in a variety of Oscar categories, especially the technical ones, whereas Birdman was going to be nominated for lots of things and be competitive to win. Boyhood did well that season, but it could only get 6 Oscar nominations total, its one technical category being film editing, where it never really had a chance to be victorious. Birdman, on the other hand, received 9 Oscar noms, 3 of those being in the technical categories, like sound editing and sound mixing, the film winning Best Cinematography. It also got 3 nominations in the acting categories instead of just 2 for Boyhood, and so those bonus categories only helped its ascension. And basically, Boyhood is a quiet, simply made movie that never goes for the extraordinary on a technical level, while Birdman practically begs the viewer to watch its filmmaking technique with awe, the movie roaming from scene to scene without any discernible edit. The look of Birdman is striking in a theater, it's striking at home, and it in many ways impressed more voters than those looking at Boyhood, no matter how amazed some voters might have been by the process in which it was made. Ultimately, Birdman had the intense flashiness it needed to pull ahead. The fourth reason, as I stated before, was that important SAG victory Birdman received, along with its wins at DGA and PGA. Again, if Boyhood had won the top prize at SAG, I think it might have won Best Picture at the Oscars, but losing there showed that Linklater's film had lost a bit of ground, and despite its victories at BAFTA later on, let's face it, the momentum had crumbled. We have seen year to year that in many ways big wins at Golden Globes and Critics' Choice guarantees nothing. Your movie can do really well there, but if it doesn't win SAG, DGA, or PGA, forget about it. The chances at winning Director and Picture at the Oscars are essentially over. So even though Boyhood won a ton of prizes that award season, it lost 3 of the crucial ones. And the fifth and final reason is that with its unique narrative style, relatable themes for Academy members, and strong ensemble cast, Birdman became the film that most Oscar voters just simply liked the best. As I mentioned before, there was some growing hate for Boyhood, awards voters thinking it was overrated, gimmicky, slow, boring, not the masterpiece they had been led to believe it was. Some of those voters who didn't care for Boyhood may not have loved Birdman necessarily. They may have seen things in that film they also didn't much care for, but they obviously liked it a lot more than Boyhood. And in a season where in Best Picture at the Oscars, there wasn't a clear third choice really, Birdman was able to come out on top. I mean, also nominated in Best Picture that year were American Sniper, The Grand Budapest Hotel, The Imitation Game, Selma, The Theory of Everything, and Whiplash. Sure, there were pockets of passion for some of those. American Sniper was a massive box office hit that overperformed on Oscar nominations morning. The Grand Budapest Hotel was Wes Anderson's most celebrated film come awards time still to date. Whiplash was my personal favorite film of 2014, one I think could have been even more competitive than it was. But no other film than Birdman that year could come close to being the consensus choice, the movie most people liked. And so, at the end of the Oscar ceremony, Birdman beat Boyhood and became the big winner that year. And a decade on, it makes sense, I guess. Birdman is in so many ways a very impressive movie, filled with fantastic cinematography, storytelling, and performances, but I will always believe that Boyhood, a film I do find superior to Birdman overall, should have won more than Best Supporting Actress at the Oscars. Birdman could have taken Best Picture, as it did, but I think Richard Linklater should have won Best Director, especially given that Alejandro G. Iñárritu would go on to win in the category again the next year for The Revenant. I just think Linklater is one of our greatest and most underappreciated cinematic storytellers, always willing to take big swings, always making sure the narrative and the characters come first. He has made a ton of great films throughout the decades, and Boyhood will always be one of his very best. Thanks so much for watching and subscribing, and let me know in the comments below which film did you want to see win Best Picture and Best Director at the Oscars. Did you want Birdman or did you want Boyhood? I'll see you next time at the awards Contender.